Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Elam Road podcast, where on tonight's show we're going to be going over two defeats against Brighton and Sheffield United back to back in the league. You might tell by my voice I'm not the happiest, to be honest. Two performances weren't great. Brighton was pretty poor. Sheffield United was fairly terrible. But joining me tonight to dissect the last couple of results and also do a brief look ahead to Villa on Sunday is Craig. Craig, it feels like it's been a while since we've done one of these. Obviously, we didn't do sort of a review for Brighton straight away. I thought we'd just condense it into one episode. But how you doing, mate? You all right?
Well, I think as much the same as everyone, I've had better weeks as a Brentford fan.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, it's probably been one of the hardest weeks as a Brentford fan in the Premier League, but I'm glad it's taken 2.5 seasons for it to come.
Yeah, exactly. Glass half full. That's what we say. Anyway, just before we get going, guys, remember to subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify channels. Leave a rating on those as well, and also give us a follow on our socials. That's at the Elam Road on Twitter and at Elam Road Pod on Instagram. Let's just get straight into it, Craig. We'll start with Brighton. Keep it fairly short, as it was just under a week ago. I tweeted after the game that there was a real gulf in class, especially in that second half. I felt like every single time we won the ball back, we would give it away almost instantly. Lots of chasing shadows, obviously not helped by the injury crisis that we're going through at the moment. But it wasn't a good night down in the South Coast, was it?
No, not at all. Not to mention the traffic that everyone seemed to get stuck in on the way down there. It was horrendous. So, for context, we missed the first 15 minutes of the game because we were stuck on the M23 for an hour and a half. It's horrendous. But yeah, mate, I think that you said it. Massive golf in class, but it's hard to overlook the injuries that we've got. It's hard to overlook it. When we was driving up to it and the teams have got announced, it was the first time I've looked at the teams and I thought, God, we're in trouble. We're in trouble. And it's the last two teams, Sheffield United, I know we'll move on to it, but it was the two teams that we've just had in this past week that have really made me look at the starting 11 and go, Jesus Christ, we're in a bit of trouble here.
Yeah, I know. I think especially with Norgard out for that Brighton game as well.
Yeah,
I did have hope for Shandon Baptiste, but he hasn't done too well, which is it's a little bit sad because I'm a big fan of Shandon's, and I thought he might kick on after getting a goal against Luton. But we should touch on Brian, obviously injured in the first half, scored the penalty before he went off. He's now out for weeks. I did see that he might actually be a doubt for AFCON, which is kind of a silver lining, I guess. Obviously not for him, not for him, but for us Brentford fans, it might mean that we don't miss him for that period. I think it's like a month or so when the AFCON's going on. But we are having a rotten old time with injuries at the moment, and even further perpetuated by Brian going off against Brighton.
Yeah, absolutely horrendous. And I do feel sorry for him because I think this would be the first AFCON that he's been, selected for. Because he would have been picked for it because obviously he changed his allegiance recently to Cameroon, so he would have been picked for it. And when I saw him hobbling off, I just had flashbacks to Alan Judge at Ipswich. He was in the running for that Ireland team to go to the Euros, and then obviously a big competition for your country coming up, and you're hobbling off the pitch. It wasn't nice to see at all. It was a horrendous injury as well. Watching the videos back of him rolling his ankle was disgusting.
Yeah, I know. Big shame as well because he has been our kind of key player, and we did look a little bit lost with that. And the thing is, I didn't really expect us to look that lost without him at Sheffield, but we really just lacked any kind of cutting edge up top. I did want to talk briefly, and I said this chat about Brighton will be brief, but I do want to talk a little bit about Mads because I was speaking to Josh Mahoney at halftime. So shout out Josh if you're listening about Mads Urselev, and it's a weird one with Mads because I'm a really big fan of his, and I know we gave him a bit of stick. I can't remember if it was the first season in the Premier or maybe the second season when he kind of had the second season because he played really well against Man City, and then he went on a kind of run where he was really good at right back, kind of deputising for whoever was out at the time. But one thing I've noticed about him recently, and it's a bit of a throwback to the Championship days, but I remember when Mads was kind of first breaking into the team in the Championship, and he'd come on maybe on 60 minutes, and he always wanted to get forward. He was one of those players where I don't know how, because he's not the paciest. He doesn't have a yard of pace in him, but he somehow managed to, every time he get down that right hand flank, he'd do something. But now it's like when he gets the ball, he's too scared to go forward with it, so he always ends up going back. He doesn't have the pace to get round his man. Are we talking about a player that maybe the Championship is his ceiling? Because I don't want to write him off because I am a big fan of his, but in terms of a right back, that drop off, and there are a few that we've noticed now with these injuries coming in, the drop off in positions in terms of Rico Henry at left back, Ivan Toney up top, and also Aaron Hickey at right back with how good he started the season. Is he someone that we're looking now and thinking, okay, maybe we need to get a new right back in January or the next transfer window in the summer?
It's hard. It's hard, isn't it? Because we often play Chris Ayer at right back as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I've found myself this season watching Mads playing at a right wing back, because there's only been a couple of games where he's played right back in a back four. I still don't know what formation we played at Brighton, by the way. I still have no idea.
I think it was a 4-4-2, wasn't it?
I don't know, because I'm sure it was at one point it was Mads as one of the centre backs, got off at right wing back, Janelt at the other. I just couldn't. I didn't know what the team was. I couldn't figure it out. But I do feel bad for him, like you say, because he did so well, broke into the team, and that run of games last year after we beat City and he's gone on that spell. There's very clearly a good player in there. It's just. Yeah, his ceiling may not be the Premier League. He isn't a shining light in the team. He steps in and does a job when he has to, but in a situation like this where we're absolutely riddled with injuries and he's starting games, you notice, unfortunately, a weakness down that right-hand side with him there. Yeah,
and I think it's particularly kind of pronounced when we play a team like Brighton, because we are going to get space, and we did get space in that first half specifically. Yeah. And he just isn't one to exploit the space like he did in the Championship. But I just feel like maybe sometimes he's just playing with the brakes on a little bit because he's scared that he's going to give the ball away. But possibly. Sometimes I just remember I remember speaking to Josh at half time, and I just say in the Championship I really rated him in terms of his attacking output, because he wasn't afraid to take his man on or nutmeg someone or take it past someone. But he's not doing that this season. And I don't know. Maybe we need to go in the transfer market and look for a right back in the next window. I think we should also talk about seriously missing Matty Jensen in the middle of the park. Maybe it was more pronounced again with Norgard being out and Onyeka having to play that kind of anchoring role, whether it was Onyeka or Janelt. Oh no, was Janelt left back against Brighton? Maybe. Yeah, it was, because Yarmo started in midfield, and I want to talk about Yarmo because he's been a shining light for me. Yeah. Yarmo's been a shining light for me in the last two games, as he has been sort of when he's had this run in the team, which made me slightly confused when Frank hooked him at half time against Brighton, because I thought he was one of the best, if not the best player on our side.
I think everyone looked lost on the pitch against Brighton. Once we lost Brian, the whole game plan just kind of went out of the window, unfortunately. And they were so good. Brighton were good. I mean, actually, were they? I mean, we were really poor. The last two games we've been really poor, so we'd have made anyone look good, unfortunately. And case in point, we made Sheffield United, who were marked to be the worst Premier League team we've ever seen, look like. You know what I mean? So it's difficult, but yeah, I agree. I mean, we've spoken about it so much recently, playing in the middle, and I think that if he stays fit and he keeps taking the opportunities that he's getting in midfield, we'll see a lot more of him. I'm very impressed. A lot of people are very impressed by him.
Yeah, 100%. I think he's class, and it's weird because I didn't really see him as that kind of Jensen style player, but he does have that, and he also has a little bit of Norgard's tenacity in terms of pressing, and he's also got a bit of Onyeka's pressing abilities. He's kind of at the moment. I'm speaking about him as if he's the perfect midfielder, but I do want to see him like have a good run in the team. When we have these injuries back, I'd like to see him start.
I think going back to your original point of what you mentioned, Jensen, besides the past two games, what was the last game he played? Because he didn't play against Luton.
No, he was injured against.
Yeah. But I mean,
game before Luton.
I know you said you're a big advocate for him, but Shandon hasn't lit the world on fire for me. He hasn't done anything, unfortunately, to impress. He scored a very, very scrappy goal against Luton, and we gave him his dues. You know what I mean? Give him a credit, paid him his dues, but he hasn't done anything really to warrant starting a game should we get that full midfield back. Now I know we're going to go on to him, but Damsgaard, I know he's going to go on to Damsgaard, but when he came on against Brighton, I was impressed by him. I know obviously we're going to have the conversation about him. I was impressed by him. I thought he was creating chances, he was breaking the lines, and he was that player that the few of us that were there together looked at as that's what Jensen would be doing. That's what Jensen would be doing. And we've missed Jensen so much, and it's difficult. It's not difficult. It's funny saying we've missed him so much after all of the grief and abuse that he's been given over the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, I think it's just a lot. We'll get onto Damsgaard because I think we are going to disagree about him. And I know that it's a bit of a hot topic with Brentford fans because he is approaching Marmite territory, like Onyeka is. I don't want to talk about Onyeka anymore. But last point on Brighton. I don't know if you listened to the preview that I did with Rich Parr, the Brighton fan, but he told me that Brighton were they had as many injuries as we do, and in that second half when they just kept bringing on these subs, I was just thinking he was just leading me down the garden path because it really showed the gap in between the teams where we were struggling. We had to bring on Damsgaard, and like you say, he was good. I'll give him his props for the Brighton game. He was good when he came on, but we were just crying out for some fresh legs in that game, and Brighton just kept bringing them on. And I was just like, Rich, you've just told me bollocks because because you're just bringing on these players who's tearing us apart. They brought on James Milner. I thought that now they're really taking the piss. But anyway, we'll move on. We'll move on from Brighton. We'll go on to Sheffield United. That was a truly miserable day in Yorkshire for those that went. They'll know what I mean. It was raining. We had one chance in the game that Morpay probably should have done better with, to be fair. It takes a bit too long in the box. I said before the game that I didn't fancy it, and I feel like that was a bit of a consensus on Twitter, especially, that it was just one of those games with Wilder, it not being his first game back in charge, but with it being his first kind of winnable game back in charge. I know they hosted Liverpool in midweek, but with the kind of machine that Liverpool are at the moment, I didn't really see them stumbling. But I knew that they'd be up for it because they know that they could probably get a result against the Brentford side with this many injuries, and it just really wasn't our day, was it?
No, not at all. I told you, I did buy a ticket, and I swerved it on the day. I woke up in the morning and it was miserable outside, and I'm thinking, I have no confidence, and I said it on last week's episode after the Luton game that I was worried about the Sheffield United game, and I'm so glad I swerved it. I had my ticket, and I just woke up and I thought, you know what? I just don't fancy it today. I just don't fancy it today. I might miss out on the taps, but trust me, boys, I've got enough. I don't need to worry about that.
Yeah, no, it was a good call.
I'm so glad I swerved it. I've been to Sheffield United a few times, and the memories of that famous 2-2 game with the red
Battle of
cards,
Bramall Lane.
The Battle of Bramall, it lives long in the memory, and I don't want to taint that with the crap that we put out on Saturday. So
yeah, I know. I mean, having watched it back on Match of the Day a couple of times now, I think Onyeka was so lucky to stay on the pitch. Yeah. I think every time I watch it, it gets worse and worse. I don't know how they haven't overturned that, because it's the most clear and obvious overturning of a decision I've seen, especially in terms of a red card. Like the bloke's gone down on the floor. I can't remember who it was, but he's gone down on the floor and he's basically gone about halfway up his leg, studs up, and it would have been a lot worse had that decision been overturned. We should talk about the goal before we talk about some individual performances. I know that you had a little thread on Twitter about Mark Flecken, another kind of spate of grief for our summer signing. I think it's unjustified. I think if we're going to talk about anything with that goal, we should talk about the defending before, when Pinnock kicked it into Norgard.
Yeah, no.
But I'll let you fire away on Flecken, because it was a pretty passionate thread that you put out on Twitter. So I'll let you fire away.
I just feel like we're giving grief to a Brentford player. First and foremost, he's a player that wears our shirt week in, week out. Whether people think he's good enough or not, everyone's right to have their own opinion. But there have been some fans out there who have been labelling him as the worst signing we've ever made, the worst goalkeeper in the Premier League. We're talking about a football club that signed Nick Proschwitz, you know? Like,
hey, I won't have that. Nick Proschwitz came up with some important goals at some point.
Rotherham away, so important. Yeah, we're talking about a club that signed Ryan Williams. We're talking about a football club that signed Andy Goggia. People are giving him grief because they need someone to give grief to. I made the point on Twitter about a couple of goals because there's that twat Uzi on Twitter who always posts shit. This is my swearing rant. He always posts shit about Brentford on there, and he never has anything positive to say. Yeah, the last positive thing that he fucking did was probably a COVID test. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? He frustrates me. And the tweet was about Flecken and Strakosha, because someone posted a response to him saying Strakosha played a game, conceded 2 goals in 2 minutes, and if he'd have held the ball, we wouldn't have lost that game. And his response was, we had a full strength defence. We had a full strength defence. You can't blame the goalkeeper. And I'm like, okay, thank you for putting it exactly like that. Thank you for putting it exactly like that. Let's look at Sheffield United, for example, shall we? We've got 2 midfielders playing at fullback. We've got a 19-year-old kid playing in midfield. Yeah, let's go to Sheffield United. We got Brighton. We got 2 midfielders playing at fullback. We didn't have a captain. We got a 19-year-old playing in midfield. But let's blame the goalkeeper. He's the scapegoat this season. It was Jensen before. It was John Swift before. It was Romain Sawyers before. Brentford fans can't just accept that we're going for a bit of a tough spell at the moment with injuries. They need someone to blame. And if we're going to talk about the goal that we conceded at Sheffield United, I saw a friend of mine yesterday, but it was up my way. He came in for a cup of tea and we had a chat about the Sheffield United game. And he said, Janelt got taken out of the game so easily, which he did, got nutmegged, completely taken out of the game. We then scramble in our own penalty area to try and clear the ball. And Pinnock, who, by the way, unreal all season, kicks it straight into Janelt again. And it falls to someone on the edge of the box. No one shuts him down. Gets it out to the lad who was definitely not wearing shin pads, if you ask me.
He's a good player, though, McAtee. I quite like him.
Good player, yeah. I think if he keeps playing City, he'll keep a hold of him and he'll be a good player. Yeah. And then he manages to put one in the top corner. Now, my mate who was at the game was behind the goal in the angle the ball was going into that top corner. And he said Brentford fans were jeering. They were shouting. He shot, and Brentford fans have gone, "Way!" And then it's dipped in the top corner. So we're thinking, if fans behind the goal have thought it's going over, players on the pitch have probably thought it's going over. The goalkeepers thought it's going over. One other debate that I saw, and me and my dad was giggling about it because we watched it here together. Me and my dad was giggling about it. One Brentford fan said, "No goalkeeper in the world is going to save that." And then another response was, "Yeah, but he should try."
I mean, it doesn't make it any better if you try.
It's like, come on, guys, cut the guy some grief. I did some working out. He's played because I think how many games we played now? 18, 16?
Something like that.
I think, let's say we've played 16 games. Strakosha played 2.5 games. Yeah, that means he's played 14. Let's just say 14 games. In those 14 games, he has played behind 12 different backlines. 12 different backlines. He has only played with the same defence twice, and that was right at the start of the season. And I think it was Fulham away, Palace at home. Twice, 2 times.
You make good points. I think as well. I mean, I had some choice words for some of the Brentford players on Saturday just because of how miserable a day it was, and I just think it was a terrible performance. I decided to voice my opinion in our boys group chat, which I think is fine. But going onto Twitter and tweeting some of the stuff that I see, it's just like, what vindication do you get from that? Just going on Twitter. Imagine if Flecken's scrolling through Twitter and he sees he is the worst signing that Brentford have ever made because of a goal that he could not have saved. It does no one any good. I'm all for it. Like, football's an emotional game, and you get angry at players, you get frustrated with players, but just don't put it on the internet. Why?
But people are happy to criticise him, but will never praise him. If it wasn't for Flecken, we'd lost that game 3 or 4-0, by the way. Yeah. We lost that game 3 or 4-0. He made 3 very important saves in that second half. A couple of really good ones as well. But that doesn't matter because it doesn't quite fit people's agenda, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. And fair enough if you've made your mind up on Flecken. I don't think he's the best keeper in the world, but there's no point in getting on his back. There's no point. It doesn't do anyone any good. And you can think he's a bad goalkeeper and still and still want the team to win. But when you think he's a bad goalkeeper and you go online, you say he's the worst signing that Brentford have ever made. What are you doing? Just like
I think
what good does it bring?
I think that the least smart thing that you could do is compare him to David Raya, because David Raya is arguably, or probably undeniably actually, the best goalkeeper we've ever had. He's gone to Arsenal, and let's point out, shall we, that Arsenal fans want rid of him. They want him gone. Arsenal fans are out there on Twitter, social media, slating him, saying that they don't want him at the football club anymore. Start Ramsdale. Ramsdale is shit. Ramsdale is shit, and they want him to start. They want him over Raya. So, mate, I feel like it's got to the point now where no matter what happens, we could win a game 7-0 and it'll be Flecken's fault we didn't win 10.
I think that's a good way to sum it up. Let's talk about some other players. I think we need to talk about Keane Lewis-Potter, another one of the Brentford players that is kind of getting these collective groans when they give it away. You mentioned earlier the scapegoats in the past, John Swift, Romain Sawyers. I feel like Mads is definitely one of those already. But I feel like Lewis-Potter is slowly getting there. Signed from Hull a couple of seasons ago, close to 20 million. Championship player of the season when we signed him, but he has been plagued by injuries throughout his Brentford career. Still hasn't scored in the league. Is time running out for him to make a mark in this Brentford side, especially when you consider the fact that in a full strength 11, does he get near starting in the front three?
So to answer the last point, no, he doesn't get near the front three, because let's say Ivan Toney doesn't leave us, and I don't think he will, given the fact that we're going to have Brian out now for an extended amount of time, unless, as we've said, someone wants to offer stupid money for Ivan. He's not going anywhere. We don't have the personnel to be selling him. No. But a fully fit front three for me is Brian, Ivan, and Kevin.
Kevin,
For me, Kevin Shod is ahead of Wissa. He's ahead of KLP as well. Unfortunately, KLP is falling down the pecking order based on the players that we bought in summer and last January. Now, do I think there's a player in there? Yes, 100%. There is a player in there, and he can come good. As you said, he's been plagued with injuries, as has everyone this season, it seems, for us. But he more so than ever. I don't know about anyone else, but I can't pick a performance that he's had off the top of my head and I go, he deserves a goal. And we spoke about him, I think, last week or the week before, where we were saying how he missed a goal from on the line against Brighton and he's managed to hit the other post somehow. Yeah. I think it's unfair to write him off now. I know he's been with us for 2 seasons, and a lot of Hull fans rated him higher than what they rated Jared Bowen as well. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. I think the injuries that we have now, with Sharda out, with Brian out, and I think we're going to have to see more of Wissa as well, who has been invisible the last 2 games, just to throw that out there, who also was lucky, I think, to not get sent off at Brighton. For slapping Billy Gilmore. But I just feel like he needs a run of games. Yeah. He's been so in and out of the team, unfortunate with injuries. Just let's give him the time he actually needs to be in the team rather than watching from the sidelines. He needs a run of games and a comfortable home victory where he scores 1. I think we're doing a world of good, because you're right. There is definitely, make no mistake, I know Jay Harris is a massive fan of him. He's always doing articles about KLP, and there is a player in there because you see it in flashes, especially when he's come off the bench before. He does provide something different to what our current wingers do in terms of being able to take on his man, and he doesn't have that pace in him that the other wingers do, but he's got quicker feet. I think he's better dribbler than someone like Brian or Wissa. So 100%, I do want him to come good. Like a lot of our players that haven't quite made the impact that we think that they should have by now. I feel like Keane Lewis-Potter is probably at the top of that list. And we'll go on to Mikael Damsgaard now, because I think that's a good segue in terms of players. Before we do, just a point, because you brought Jay up. He posted a tweet after Sheffield United game or before it, that it was the first game in 4 years that Brian or Ivan Toney haven't been in the starting 11.
4 years?
4 years, yeah.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, I think
Wow.
it's 3 or 4 years. Yeah, first time that one or the other hasn't been in the starting 11. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it certainly showed, because without without both of them, we looked fucking dreadful going forward. But let's talk about Mikkel Damsgaard, because two kind of cameo performances. The first one against Brighton I thought was a lot better. I mean, Sheffield United, he was looking, he's kind of has that aura of Jensen. You know, you want someone to just, when the pressure's on, to just take your time, pick a pass, and carry the ball. And he did do that against Brighton, maybe less so against Sheffield, but I know he's impressed you. You messaged me in the week and said that you want him to do well. So I'll let you take it away with this, because I think we might actually disagree.
What I'll start with by saying Mikkel Damsgaard has the tensile strength of a toothpick. He's got no, you just look at him and you think there's nothing to me that suggests you should be a footballer. Like, he's just small, he's skinny, but I want him to do well. I so want him to do well. And before he got injured at the start of the season, back end of last season, I thought we saw a bit more of him. He was breaking into the team a little bit more, and he was impressing to the point where the only thing he was missing, again, like KLP, is a goal, because I don't think he's scored for Brentford yet.
No.
The only thing he's missing is a goal. He came on at Brighton, and I thought he was the only player with any positivity or any forward thinking on the pitch. And I thought much the same again against Sheffield United. He's how long has he been in for? 2 seasons now?
Yeah, two.
And I think that people are willing to give KLP an opportunity, but they're not willing to give Damsgaard an opportunity. And these are players that have both been through long-term injuries. They're both breaking into the team. Damsgaard was breaking into the team, and unfortunately got that injury in August, I think, since the Fulham game. And I rate him, and I want him to do well. I just want him to do well so badly. He's that player that, for some reason, he's just sort of, he's got a place in my heart as a Brentford player.
I don't think you can ignore, you can't go past the fact that the stuff you mentioned at the top of your answer is, he's so slight. He's so slight. And I've touched on it before in the podcast. He's definitely a player that when you look at, you think, okay, maybe you do well in Serie A like he did at his last club. But in the Premier League, I can't get around the fact that he's not that quick. He gets muscled off the ball, and it even happened against Brighton and Sheffield United at least once, when he tried to kind of take a couple of touches, which I'd encourage as well if we're 1-0 down and you want someone to just have a little bit of presence and calmness on the ball. He takes a little bit of touches and he just gets easily barged off the ball. And I'm just thinking, you need to get on the damn shakes, mate, because you need to bulk up a bit, and because he just gets muscled off it too easy. So I'm not sure that, like, throwing him on when we're 1-0 down against Sheffield United and it's freezing outside and it's Chris Wilder and there's a big atmosphere, I don't know if he's that kind of player to do that. And it might be like
we didn't have anyone else, you know what I mean? We didn't have anyone else to bring on at that point. We didn't have anyone else. So it's difficult. It's hard to compare him, analyse his two performances over the last game, because Sheffield United, was it Sheffield United or was it Brighton? Norgard missed Brighton, didn't he? Yeah, it was Brighton. He's coming into a midfield which was 3 players who, I don't think the 3 of them have started a midfield game together anyway. Mm-hmm. So we're putting players who are coming back from injury, KLP as well, coming back from injury, into a makeshift B team hybrid of Brentford players. So I think I have been impressed by him. A couple of people I've spoken to have said, yeah, he's come on and he's been quite forward thinking, been quite a positive player, and I see him starting against Villa on Sunday.
Yeah, we'll get on to Villa first. I think normally we do a hot topic segment at this point in the podcast, but I thought because because we've been talking about injuries the whole episode, and I thought it'd be quite on brand to just kind of take a step back and look at the injuries we've got, and sort of, you know, we're going to take a look at first what we both think our full strength 11s are, followed by how we'll look to line up after Christmas with some players going off to AFCON. Obviously, Brian might not be one of those anymore. But first of all, the injury list is as it stands. Chris Ayer, who I think is back towards the end of December, as is Nathan Collins, although I did see a picture of him in training today, which is good. Rico Henry is obviously far more long-term. Aaron Hickey's, I think, is the end of December. Jensen, I haven't actually... They said he was touch and go before the Brighton game, and then he was out for Brighton and Sheffield United. So I don't know what the timescale is there. JDS looks like he's back on the grass. But again, another one of those players who, out of the players that I'm listing, I would say he's probably the one that isn't nailed on to start. Kevin Schade, I say, just as he was hitting the right kind of form, he's now injured, but I think he's back towards the end of December. Brian Mbumo's a bit more long-term, especially now he could be out for AFCON, and obviously Ivan Toney is suspended, but we only have 3 more games until Ivan Toney plays for Brentford again, which is quite exciting when you think about it. So when you look at that, bar Josh De Silva, I'd say there's a case for every single one of those players to be in the first 11 for Brentford. So I'll put it to you first, Craig. I reckon we're probably going to massively agree on these lineups, but what's your strongest Brentford 11, 1 to 11?
Wait, and you mean including the players
so if no one's injured, if we've got a full strength team to pick, which is quite fun because it's like we don't have it at the moment, so this is quite fun to do.
So Fleckins in goal. Fleckins in goal.
I
know I'm gonna go for our non-top 6 team 4-3-3. Okay. So I've got Rico at left back, Aaron Hickey at right back, and I've got Nathan Collins and Ethan Pinnock as my 2 centre backs. Mm-hmm. I've got Norgard, Janel, and Jensen in the middle, with Kevin one side, Brian the other, and Ivan as the main man.
Right. What? So no, you're not putting Yarmo in? No.
With a full strength team, he can come on after 60
I quite like to see him. I quite like to see him maybe replacing Janel. But Janel is one of those players. I've got mixed feelings about Janel sometimes because he never really puts a foot wrong, but at the same time he doesn't really light up a game. And I guess you can't really do that from midfield. But he is kind of 7 out of 10 every game. He's one of those players. He's kind of like reminds me of Jake Bidwell a little bit.
He's consistently consistent, which is what we need in a midfield player. And he's been playing at left back for the last 5 games. So that's a good midfielder. I mean,
in terms of your 1 to 11, I think I'd say you're pretty bang on. I mean, the only thing is against the top 6 teams, I mean, it would be kind of quite an easy switch to just plug Aya in as the 3rd centre half and then push Hickey out to the right. But I think you're pretty bang on the money. It's just like, it's so sad because I'm thinking about that kind of starting 11 with either Yana or Yarmo. I would actually campaign for Yarmo to take his place in that team alongside Norgard and Jensen. But against that, like that starting 11, if we played them against Brighton, I'm looking at that game and I'm feeling so much different in terms of the space, because I know Brighton dominated the ball and we were chasing shadows and there was a massive golf in class. But with a full strength team, I'd fancy that team, especially with Hickey at right back. It was such a big miss. And obviously Rico, it's just down those flanks. I think those 2 flanks are the biggest, and they're bigger misses than Ivan Toney.
As soon as Rico got injured at Newcastle, everyone knew that the whole team was going to be different. He's one of those players that you just know, okay, we get 7 out of 10 from Vito every game, but we'll get a 9-10 from Rico every single game. It doesn't matter who he's playing, whether it's Luton, whether it's Liverpool, whether we get Mansfield in the cup or he's playing Man City. Do you know what I mean? He's our 10 out of 10 player every week. He had one blip against Bournemouth, which he gave the ball away, which was somehow Flecken's fault from people on social media. But he's the biggest miss. Rico, for me, is the biggest miss because we've got players who can cover the right-hand side, but we never seem to have anyone who can cover the left. Janel's done a good job, but he's not Rico Henry.
And for all that Janel actually offers you at left back, I've spoken about it before because I think he's got better sort of technical ability than Rico. He can pick a pass better when he's on that left-hand side, but just in terms of Rico's kind of bombing up and down, his 1v1 defending is next to none. When you look at those injuries that we've got, I mean, JDS, another one of those players who we've spoken about it at length on the podcast before in terms of how important he was to that championship side. And he was one of our best players, if not the best player besides Ivan Toney. Another one of those players where you look at, he's now had another injury. There was a great podcast that the people on the Beautiful Game podcast did with Josh De Silva. He's one of those players, like you mentioned with Damsgaard, he's got a place in my heart because I just want him to succeed so badly. And I really hope that when he comes back, he kind of hits the ground running, because when he's at his full flight, he like I said, one of the best players in the championship. during that season where we went up.
Unreal.
Who else in terms of those? Go on.
Just saying, I think we've noted down 9 players: Aya, Collins, Rico, Hickey, Jensen, JDS, Sharda, Embuemo, and Ivan. So we've noted down 9 players that we missed, and I put 7 straight in. 7 of those 9 straight into my starting 11. So
yeah,
take from that what you will. Do you know what I mean? When Eddie Howe is complaining that he's the worst hit manager in the league for injuries, get fucked. Get fucked. That rattled me when he said that Newcastle have been hit the most with injuries. That rattled me so bad.
just another question. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they kind of said that when teams are in these kind of injury troubles, and they say, we'll be fine when they all come back. They pointed out that a lot of the time it's never that fine when they do come back, because we've spoken about KLP coming back from injury and he's kind of looked a little bit shaky. We've spoken about Damsgaard as well. Some of these players, when they do come back from these injuries that are long term, especially someone like Rika Henry, whose ACL is now is that his 3rd ACL tear? I think
second or third.
Second or third.
Yeah,
one of the two.
I remember that.
So he's not going to be the same player. In terms of the other players, I mean, Ivan, I think, is going to be even better. But someone like Josh Da Silva, I just feel like maybe he's just had one too many injuries now for it to work.
Yeah.
Chris Aya, it's a weird one with him because he's not had like a long-term injury, but he's just had a constant short-term injuries. Yeah. So, I mean, I hope it's going to be better, but in terms of those players that do come back after Christmas, I don't know why, because we're normally like a bundle full of positivity on this podcast, but for some reason I was just thinking maybe it's just I'm spending too much time talking to Callum. He's so negative all the time. I see Callum's tweet the other day and he was like, how have we got ourselves into this mess? We could be near the relegation zone come Christmas.
He's the most negatively positive person and the most positively negative person I've ever met in my life. Yeah.
But we'll be praying. We'll be praying when these injuries do come back that we'll be in a much better position.
We're talking about possibly changing back to an entirely different, outfield team. We might have a little spell. So let's say we get Ivan back, we get Nathan Collins, we get Aaron Hickey, Sharda's not far off. We get JDS, Matty Jensen, and Brian's obviously going to be out for a little bit. So and I is going to be back. We're talking about seven players who can affect and will affect the 11 every week. So Thomas Frank's going to go from having one headache of I ain't got no bloody players to put out to play against Sheffield United to shit, I've got too many players again.
Well, that's what we hope for. We hope for positive headaches. Positive headaches is what we need.
Good headaches.
Yeah. We'll go on to Villa. Probably couldn't have picked a worse time to play Villa, considering they're the form team in the league, coming off the back of back-to-back wins against last season's title challengers City and Arsenal. I mean, the way they played against City was just incredible. I've not seen a team dominate City like that. I mean, I know we've beat them twice, but ours weren't smash and grab wins, but they were different kinds of wins. We hit them on the counter and took our chances and deserved the wins. But I mean, Villa deserved more than just a goal. Arsenal, they kind of, it's such a football cliche, but the good teams still win when they're playing badly. I mean, they did hang on for a bit against Arsenal, and Arsenal did have their chances, but they've just beaten two of the title challenging sides from last season. They've won 15 games in a row at home. I mean, having said that, I know I'm trying to bring the positivity back into the podcast. It would be so Brentford for us to go and beat Villa on Sunday.
I posted a tweet. I don't know if you saw it. I posted a tweet which said, "I'm expecting one of two results this weekend based on Villa's form. I'm expecting either Brentford 1, Aston Villa 0, or Brentford 0, Aston Villa 6. I have no in between.
Yeah, I mean, we could have Collins back by the time that comes. We'll have to wait until Thomas Frank's press conference to give some updates, for him to give us some updates on the injuries that we have at the moment. But it's just a big shame. I mean, with some of the key personnel we have back for this game, with the atmosphere that will be down there at the G-Tech on Sunday, it is one of those ones, like, I don't know why, but when we play the top 6 at home, when we have a big game at home, I always expect us to perform, and it's probably probably unwarranted because I don't know what our record is like against the top six at home, because I know we picked up quite a few wins away from home, but just I used to have a feeling when we used to go down to Griffin Park, when there was a big game against a team that were near us in the league or against a team that were near the top of the league, I always felt like the fans could really be the 12th man in that game. And I feel like we might have another one, and I'm trying to be positive, but we might have another one on Sunday. What do you think?
It's going to be another
it's going to be tough
game.
It's going to be tough.
Incredibly tough. I'm an advocate for getting behind the boys no matter who we're playing. But if we can get an atmosphere like we have had recently, I have felt like our home and away sport has been a bit lackluster recently. Now, I don't know if that's down to a bit of negativity around the injuries that we've got and the teams that we're putting out, performances that we're putting in. I also see there being a bit of sourness if we lose on Sunday. It's completely out of Thomas Frank's hands, and it's completely down to the 11 that he puts out to make their point and make their case for themselves when, you know, our full 11 is back to full fitness. But they haven't done it. You know, we beat Luton, and yes, they put in a very good performance against Man City, and they lost to Arsenal 4-3. A cracking game that was, by the way. That was. But they weren't very good. You know, they weren't very good when we played them. Yeah, we had a really good performance against Arsenal. We've won once. We got 3 points in the last 5 games based on one win, which was against Luton, which is horrendous form on paper.
Yeah.
I hate to say it because I don't like being negative, but I see no other result than a Villa win this weekend. I just think that we don't have the personnel at the moment to compete with teams that are on such a high as they are.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a team on a bigger high than them at the moment after back-to-back wins. And I think they're probably winning Europe on Thursday as well.
If I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm tempted to look at the table now. Actually, if results go their way,
they could end up top.
And they beat us, they could end up top of the league. Yeah,
they could.
You know, 2 points behind Liverpool, a point behind Arsenal. And who do they play this weekend? Who do Liverpool Arsenal play?
Liverpool are playing United, I'm pretty sure. Don't know who Arsenal are playing, but it's
Liverpool are at home to United, and Arsenal are at home to Brighton. So and this is all on Sunday as well. So they've got a real shout again, top of the Premier League. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I'm recording an episode with a Villa podcast tomorrow, so we're going to talk about sort of Villa more broadly. But I mean, just going into that game on Sunday, like you mentioned, I do think it would be very Brentford if we managed to somehow win. But with the injury crisis that we've got at the moment, it is looking pretty bleak against a Villa side that they haven't played this well in 50 years or whatever it is. So yeah, we'll do a little bit more of an in-depth dive into Villa tomorrow, so look out for that. But just before we wrap up the podcast, guys, I do want to talk about the podcast just more broadly in general. Since we've started doing it, we've loved sort of every minute of it. It's been great. But just to give the listeners a little bit of like a analysis of the numbers that we're getting and stuff that we want to come of the podcast. In terms of the YouTube, which everyone can see, we get between 100 and 200 views per video every week, and that's 2 videos a week. In terms of what we get on audio platforms, it's closer to sort of 600-700. So we're about 1,000 listens per episode, give or take, depending on if we lose or we win. There's actually quite a big disparity depending on if we lose or we win, which is weird because if I was a Brentford fan and I was listening to another Brentford podcast, I'd love to listen to when we lose for some reason, but just to figure out what if people have the same kind of issues that I have with the performance. But based on what we see, we actually get more listens when we win. I really don't understand.
Well, I'd like to just say, based on the fact that we've lost 2 games on the bounce now and the numbers that we give him, I'd just like to say, hi, Dad. Thanks for watching again.
But yeah, no, just in terms of the comments on YouTube is what I want to talk about specifically. We get, I don't know, between 100 and 200 people listening, watching each week on YouTube. I think it would be absolutely great if we managed to kind of start a little YouTube community, if you will. If you're watching on YouTube right now, drop a comment. And it would be great if we could see people dropping comments on each video. And whether it be me, Craig, Callum or Dan or Clayton or whoever it is, we'll check back in and we'll have a little conversation and we can sort of have, I don't know, might be ambitious to have 100 people commenting on the video, but if we had sort of 10 or 11 comments each week, it'd be great to get a little conversation going so that we could kind of bring it into the next episode as well. We can be like, okay, well, this person said this last week, let's talk about this in the next episode. It would be a good kind of bridge and good talking points. It's always good to kind of have a little community or a little fan base within the broader fan base. So if you're watching on YouTube, it would be great if we could kind of turn this platform into a kind of a GPG take two, because the GPG probably needs reforming, and that's all I'm going to say. Sorry, Trevor, if you're listening, but it can be a bit crazy on the GPG at some point. So let's try and boost these comments up, and we'll get a kind of conversation going each week, which I think would be really good, Craig.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Exactly, perfect. So I'll leave it there. The Ealing Road podcast will be back on Thursday with that Aston Villa preview. I'm recording an episode tomorrow night with Neil from the For the Love of Paul McGrath podcast. Bit of a mouthful that, but anyway. So yeah, look out for that one. We'll be talking Villa as title challengers, key men in their team, of which there are many, including Ollie Watkins is a familiar face in there. So yeah, much more to look forward to on that one. And I'm actually really looking forward to it because I think that Villa conversation, in terms of just a more broader football conversation, it's an incredible story. Just in terms of the size of the club, Villa Park, that incredible home run that they're on at the moment, 15 wins on the bounce. That's just mental. But yeah, so that'll be coming out on Thursday night, and you'll have 3 days to have a look at that one. And like I said, drop some comments on this video, drop some comments on that video, and we can hopefully get kind of a little forum going each week. So yeah, just before we go, guys, remember to subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify channels, leave a rating and also leave a comment, and also give us a follow on our socials. That's at the Ealing Road on Twitter and at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. Craig, it's been a pleasure, mate, as always, and I'll see you on Sunday.
Yeah, up the bees.